Justice Jackson, Ketanji Jackson, she's been doing some interviews. She's been making some statements. Just like week ago, 2 weeks ago, she had a pretty epic dissent.
Yes.
That went viral, if you will, because it was very, very dramatic. But now we're finding out that it's not just in these moments that she wants to be dramatic. It is, she feels like her calling to be dramatic as a Supreme Court justice. Let's hear from her directly. This is at the Forbes Indianapolis Bar Association event. Top-notch event, I'm sure. Let's hear.
What keeps you up at night?
I would say the state of our democracy. I would say that I am really very interested in getting people to focus and to invest and to pay attention to what is happening in our country and in our government.
We call that in the wrestling business a cheap pop, which you go out there and you're like, if you were in Nashville, you'd be like, oh man, who here are Titans fans? I feel like it's very similar going out there and just being like, what keeps you up at night? The state of our democracy. Everyone cheers. Of course, this is not the usual rhetoric we've heard from Supreme Court justices. This came from an interview where they even asked her stuff like, what music do you listen to? What's it like behind closed doors? And even her statements of what it's like behind closed doors, she thought it'd be letting your hair down, chilling out with the justices. And she finds out that it's not really like that. At least with this group of justices. We know historically there has been some good friendships that have come out of the justices, but this lineup of justices clearly are not hanging out on the weekends.
Well, I mean, you've got a different age group in. You've got some with kids. You've got some that are just at different points in life. But it doesn't mean that they're individually, there aren't the relationships there, but that when they're in the room to make serious decisions that impact Americans' lives, that impact our economy, impact our health care, impact the power of the president, the power of Congress, the power of the judiciary, that we're going to take those fairly seriously while we're making those decisions. That's not the time to necessarily be casual. But I think what it goes to is that she is unabashedly, and she went on in these statements and interviews based off of that dissent that she issued, that she is going to not only let you know how she thinks about the law, which is the job of a judge, in this case a justice, and that's really the only job. Their job is not to tell you whether a law is good or bad. It's whether it's legal, basically, and whether it follows the Constitution and is the law being carried out correctly. That's the executive side of the law. So is the executive branch carrying out the law of Congress correctly? These are, again, it's the balls and strikes scenario. It's not which pitcher to put in, which pitch to throw, when to swing, when to steal the base. That's not the job, and it's not their job to say that you had a good strategy going into the game or you had a bad strategy going into the game. Their job is just bottom line. And this is what makes me the most nervous, is that if the left starts embracing this on a new scale, it's about judicial activism on steroids.
This is what stuck out to us just a little bit, almost 2 weeks ago, about the universal injunctions issue, where she said perhaps the degradation of our rule of law regime would happen anyway, but this court's complicity in the creation of a culture of disdain for lower courts, their rulings, and the law as they interpret it will surely hasten the downfall of our governing institutions, enabling our collective demise. But she didn't stop there. Just putting it in writing, she's been, now that they're out of session, the Supreme Court term is over, she's been going and doing interviews, speaking at some local bar associations, some things of that nature, which is not abnormal. When they're in a recess, that they may go and have some interviews. A lot of times they have a book that they're promoting during that time. So it's not completely abnormal, but it's the content of these interviews and the statements that she's making are raising eyebrows and creating headlines about the junior justice on the court. And what we have seen is, one, what we played in the first segment, where she said the state of our democracy keeps her up at night. But also we're getting an insight of how she views her job as a Supreme Court justice. And I think we should play this from Justice Jackson. This is just from about 4 days ago. It's bite 3 about what she sees the purpose of these dissents that are so apocalyptic. Let's go ahead and roll that for everyone.
What I feel that I've been privileged to do is use the writings that I do, the work that I do, to explain my views about the way our government does and should work, the way the court does and should work, I think the nice part about being on the court is that you have the opportunity, whether you're in the majority or in the dissent, to express your opinions.
Jordan, I know that there's probably not like a primer on what you need to know before you become a Supreme Court justice. Yeah. The justices will bring you on and kind of show you the ropes, and you definitely have clerks that help you with that as well. But the fact that she thinks it's the privilege to explain her views about the way the government does or should not work, that is actually not really the job of this. These aren't op-eds that she's writing when she writes a dissent that are going to the Washington Post. These are a part of the record of the court.
No, I mean, this is, again, it is the job of elected politicians who are, who represent a constituency of voters in either district or at the state level, to go and take those issues. Ultimately, the President of the United States then to set up a government to execute those laws, like we keep saying. It is not the job of the judicial branch to tell the government how it should run. And so where I think that it'd be okay is if she went to that statement and jumped right to the part about courts. There's certainly a lot of cases that get to the Supreme Court about whether or not the courts made the right decision and whether or not even a court may have violated your constitutional rights by issuing this kind of jury instruction or by how long the case took or the issues like that. Fine. That's when to weigh in on the court system. Stay in the lane of the separation of powers, because the reason why this keeping her up at night is the state of our democracy. So long as we have a court system that is a check, and that the check works without any kind of enforcement measure other than a court decision. So it doesn't take police force, it doesn't take a military. Then we have a system of law that we respect. And I think actually the bigger concern there is not what's happening when a case makes its way all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. I don't think anyone disputes that, like the decision or not. It's these lower court decisions that are making people lose faith in the judiciary, because it's like, how many times does the Supreme Court need to say you can't issue nationwide injunctions? And then a judge came back and says, I'm just going to certify a class before the class is even put forward. That's
the comments that are coming in. It seems like every day we're talking about either judges or justices and whether they're activists or not.
Well, that should actually be what keeps you up at night, is where the court system's going to strip away the power of the people that you've actually elected. So you cast your vote. And then these, judges and justices last month, through many different presidencies and different elected officials. But again, they're just supposed to be a part, and they're supposed to be the place of last resort. You go to the court because, again, the legal other avenues for to get a wrong righted weren't available, and this is supposed to be the most difficult avenue. If they start just becoming legislators, we've talked about legislating from the bench. If they become legislators, then again, the confirmation process needs to be totally looked at once more, because this is, again, it's the most dangerous fact is to go down and say, I don't care about the law. I care about the outcome of this case.
And Jordan, it's not just the conservative members of the court that are calling out Justice Jackson's opinion writing and not sticking to looking at the law. There was a stay granted after the term was over by the court, and this was about the reduction of the size of the federal workforce that had been blocked by a lower court judge. And the court granted a stay on that issue, so sided with the administration. And Justice Jackson felt the need to dissent from the grant of stay. But because of her dissent, which was about, reckless executive power by the president, Justice Sotomayor wrote a concurrence, just about a paragraph, agreeing with the court granting the stay. And here's what she wrote. Had to call out one of her colleagues on the same ideological spectrum as her, and says, I agree with Justice Jackson that the president cannot restructure federal agencies in a manner inconsistent with congressional mandates. Here, however, the relevant executive order directs the agencies to plan reorganizations and reductions in force, quote, consistent with applicable law, end quote. So she's having to even point out, like, did you look at the material and what was at hand here? Because the EO isn't saying willy-nilly just start firing, get rid of everyone. It's saying, in accordance with law, you have to do this. And so she even says, I joined the court stay because it leaves the district court free to consider those questions in the first instance, and whether or not they're going to go through the proper process.
Right. And that's she's not saying whether she agrees or not that the Trump administration should be doing this. It's because that's not her job is to say, under the law and the way we apply the laws, should this be stopped from the beginning, or should the case begin and then ultimately let this go through the judicial process? She's not coming to a conclusion on the major issue. These are supposed to be issues. Again, they're not on the merits. This is not substantive. This is all procedural, and yet procedure has become the weapon of the left in the judiciary. They're not using the actual court case anymore. They don't think that they need those. They're using procedure to try and prevent those who you've actually elected by the American people, from being able to do their jobs. In the past, lower courts were very hesitant to take side on the procedural issue of telling an executive before a case had even gone about, before they even heard any actual argument, before the evidence has been presented in the trial court, that you can't do something. I mean, it happened, but it happened like a dozen times in entire presidency. And then President Trump comes along, and it's the majority of times in history, more times than if you add up all of the others, since this would be in modern law. President Trump has had this happen to him more than any other presidents all combined. So this is not something we've long been dealing with. This is, Logan, what I said, is like the new threat to our democracy is actually coming out of the judiciary and her judicial philosophy.
You never knew this much about the justices or the judges, and generally, I said they had
like the caller said,
an air of mystique. You didn't know exactly where they were going to land. You didn't know how they were going to vote. That was part of it. You could get 9-0 decisions. You still can, by the way. You could get 9-0 decisions because you knew they weren't necessarily always judging it based on their personal political beliefs.
Right.
And remember what a terrible outrage there was when one Justice Alito, after President Obama mischaracterized an opinion by them, just quietly to himself said, "That's not true," under his breath. And that was scandal all over D.C. that a justice
said, "You lie."
No, that was Congressman Wilson. That was different.
Felt like the same. I kind of combined those in my head.
I think we should play bite 6 because this boils kind of down to the entire problem of what we are seeing with what she views her role through her writing of dissents. And even the language that's used in some of these dissents, she during the one about injunctions had a ... wait for it ... almost as if it's like a thread on X instead of a dissent.
An injunction, conjunction, junction.
Right. That's Schoolhouse Rock. Yeah. But if you want to listen to this, let's go to bite 6 from Justice Jackson.
I just feel that I have a wonderful opportunity to tell people, in my opinions, how I feel about the issues.
So, Jordan, she's literally, not burying the lead here. She's telling everyone that she has an opportunity to tell people her opinions
when they're
about the
confirmed
issues.
and they get asked questions about that, it wouldn't be appropriate for me to answer.
Yeah, they say it's not my job to have an opinion about that. Yeah. It's just about the law.
Yeah, and then suddenly, you become, again, I do think you're right to some extent. The way we look at the court has changed what we kind of expect, and I think for the most part, the justices actually fall in line with the more traditional approach to it, even with the new. But I think some of the, these newer justices, I mean, they have to deal with a lot more security risk, and so I think that makes them think too. Maybe I am this bigger figure publicly that I'm supposed to be speaking out, so I'm going to go do these much more kind of partisan events.
It's I don't really love the partisanship. I do like sort of a peek behind the curtain. I think it's interesting.
I think that's fine. I think what's not fine is saying, I'm going to tell you how I feel about the issues. Yeah. Then you should have run for office.
Yeah. We are so excited to announce the ACLJ's brand new app, completely redesigned to provide you with the best tools available to partner with us at the ACLJ. You can watch the daily Secular program, sign the petitions, customize your ACLJ membership experience, donate with the click of a button, and receive up-to-the-minute critical updates that the mainstream media can't censor. Just scan the QR code on your screen or go to your phone's app store, search ACLJ, and click install. It's that simple.